She swore on camera, on her own live, with her own two lips, that the man she is running around calling her king is a free man. A single man, a divorced man, a man with no ring on his conscience and no wife on his paperwork. Sugar, one problem. One tiny, unforgivable, court-stamped problem. That man is still legally, right this second, another woman's husband. And the same champion who just called herself somebody's future wife turned around, looked into a camera, and accused a whole radio journalist of running behind her own husband's back with a barber. Let that land for a second. The woman being blamed for one marriage falling apart is out here pointing a finger and yelling cheater at somebody else. And that one little word she keeps flinging around like confetti, that word divorced, love, that word is a landmine. That word is about to walk her straight into a courtroom and walk her straight out with half of everything she has ever punched, bled, and sweat for gone. Fix your drink, because this one is loud, this one is cold, this one is written in a language only self-destruction speaks. Let's pour it. Welcome to the steep with Simone, where the kettle stays screaming and the cup stays full strength. Now everything I'm about to lay out is allegedly built on publicly available reporting, publicly recorded interviews, and publicly filed paperwork. So don't come knocking on my door, sugar. Do me one small favor before we go any deeper. Tap that like button, hit subscribe, and pass this one to the friend who has been screenshotting every clip in the group chat since Monday. Because this one, love, this one is about to age like fine tea. Every prediction I make in this video is about to come back around in 6 months and knock on the door of every doubter in the comment section. Bookmark this timestamp. Screenshot this thumbnail. Remember where you were when you heard it first. For anyone just walking into the room, here is the cast of characters in this circus. On one side, we have Claressa Shields, two-time Olympic gold medalist, the self-crowned greatest woman boxer walking the planet, a champion whose right hand has knocked down opponents twice her weight class, a woman who has bled for every belt on her shelf, a woman who trained through winters in Flint, Michigan when nobody believed in her, when the sponsors were not calling, when the promoters were not paying, a woman who earned every syllable of the title she uses. On another side, we have MZ Shinika, a radio host who did what radio hosts are literally paid to do, which is ask one clear, one polite, one perfectly reasonable question in an on-record interview. A journalist. Professional. Somebody with a microphone and a job description. In the middle of this mess, we have Papoose, veteran New York rapper, longtime husband, longtime father, and now the man whose name is being dragged through every timeline from Brooklyn to Bali. And on the fourth side of the square, we have Remy Ma, hip-hop royalty, a rap queen with a decade-long marriage on paper and receipts nobody in this story wants to look at. One interview, one question, one clip, one paperwork disaster. That is all it took to turn a promotional press run into the most expensive live stream a champion has ever gone on. Let's break it down. Here is how this whole fire started. MZ Shinika sat across from Claressa Shields in a professional setting, cameras rolling, mic hot, and asked one simple, one direct, one entirely fair question. She asked how much longer Claressa planned to be in a relationship with a man who is legally still somebody's husband. That's it. That was the whole question. No trap, no ambush, no digging, no shade. Just a reporter doing her job in the same room as her subject. And inside that room, Claressa Shields was ice. She was composed, she was measured, she answered the question, she closed the topic, she moved on. Beautiful, professional, adult. But then, days later, love, the same champion opened her phone, opened a live stream, and detonated. She sat inside her own gym, on her own camera, on her own time, safely tucked behind her own audience, and unloaded a full clip on a woman who was not even in the room. And here is the piece nobody is saying out loud. You do not sit up at night boiling over a question that missed you. You boil over a question that hit you. That question crawled inside the champion and set up furniture. That question moved into her head rent-free and lit candles. And notice the geography of the counterattack. Not in the studio, not at the radio station, not on Shinika's platform. In her own gym, on her own live, surrounded by her own people. Sugar, real confidence answers in the room. Insecurity waits until it gets home, locks the door, and yells at the wallpaper. Because what actually came out of the champion's mouth on that live had nothing to do with boxing. Nothing. It had nothing to do with training camp, Nothing to do with weight cuts, nothing to do with press obligations. It had everything to do with a barber shop. Shields looked into that camera and told the entire internet that the very radio host who asked her one question is the same woman running around cheating on her husband with a barber. On the record, on camera, on her own live stream. Full stop. Ooh. Now let me line this up so nobody misses the picture. The woman who is currently dating a man who is legally still married to another woman, the woman being publicly discussed as the reason a marriage cracked, that same woman just accused another wife of cheating. Sugar, the glass in this house didn't crack. It didn't shatter. It turned to dust and blew out the window. Because this stopped being about defense a long time ago. This became a rescue mission. She could not defend her own situation, could not answer the actual question, could not sit with the discomfort of the mirror. So she picked up a whole other marriage and threw it into the bonfire hoping nobody would notice hers was already burning. That is not a counterpunch. That is a woman flipping the entire chessboard because she was losing the game. Classic move. When you cannot defend your own porch, you go set fire to the neighbors. But Sugar, if the barber accusation made your jaw drop, brace yourself. Because what she said next about the actual reason Papoose is with her, that is the clip that broke every group chat in America. Claressa Shields looked into that camera and read out what can only be described as a resume. She listed her body. She listed her face. She listed her youth. She listed her bank account. She listed, and I promise you I am not adding a single word to this, the things her body can do behind closed doors. She listed all of it in order, out loud on camera, for the algorithm to feast on. That was the reason, according to her, that Papoose stays. Not love. Not partnership. Not shared history. Not a decade of quiet loyalty. Not a lifetime of building. A resume. Sugar, sit with that. Because here is the part one need you to catch, and I need you to catch it in slow motion. She listed her looks. She listed her age. She listed her physique. She listed her career. She listed her private capabilities. She listed everything under the sun that a woman can put on a shelf to keep a man interested. But not one time, not one single sentence, not one syllable in that entire monologue did Shields say that the man she is defending loves her. Not once. That was not a love story. That was a sales pitch. That was a job application read out loud with the audience as the hiring committee. And when a woman has to read a resume that long to explain why a man is still around, the real question isn't who she is convincing. It is why she keeps convincing. And there is something else buried in that resume speech that I need you to catch, Sugar, because the internet flew right past it. The champion did not say the man treats her well. She did not say the man protects her peace. She did not say the man shows up on the hard days. She did not say the man is a partner in the deepest sense of the word. She talked about surface. She talked about assets. She talked about inventory. She sounded like a real estate listing reading itself out loud. And that is the tell. That is the crack in the porcelain. Because a woman in a secure relationship does not itemize her attractiveness on camera. She does not need to. Her security is the argument. Shields on that live was arguing. She was pleading a case in front of a jury of strangers, and the case she was pleading was not that the man loves her. The case she was pleading was that the man has good reasons to stay. Love. Reasons to stay is not love. Reasons to stay is a lease. And every lease has an expiration date. And speaking of that man being around, that divorce the champion keeps bragging about, that is the single biggest mistake in this entire opera. And I need you to lock in for this next part because this is the detail that transforms the whole story from petty to catastrophic. She keeps repeating on live, in interviews, in comment sections, that the man is divorced, that he filed, that he is a separated man, that he is available. Sugar, filed for divorce is not divorced. Filed is not final. Filed is a request. Filed is a piece of paper walked into a clerk's office. Filed is the starting line, not the finish line. Papoose filed. That part is true. What is also true, what nobody is telling this champion, what her lawyer better be telling her behind closed doors, is that filing was never finalized. Which means today, right this very moment as you are watching this video, that man is still married. Legally, structurally, financially, in every way a court recognizes a marriage, Papoose is Remy Ma's husband. So every single time she says the phrase, "he is not a married man," the law is looking her square in the face and saying, yes, he is. And here is the part that should keep her lawyer awake at night. If that divorce ever does finalize while the champion is publicly parading around as the reason for it, Papoose could walk into that courtroom entitled to half of that $8 million boxing fortune, half of the belt money, half of the endorsements, half of the future purses, half of everything she has punched, bled, cut weight, and sacrificed to build with her own 2 knuckles. And she is out here defending him for free, doing his public relations for free, cleaning up his image on live for free, explaining his paperwork on the internet for free. Sugar, the word filed is not a flex. The word filed is a fuse. That fuse is burning inside her own living room and she is standing next to it holding a match, smiling. She thinks the fact that he filed is proof he is committed to her. Love, all it proves is that the ink is still wet. The wife is still the wife. The clock is still ticking. And every day she goes on live calling him her king. She is running down the clock on her own fortune. Let me sit with that word, king, for a second, Sugar, because it is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this story. Shields has been on record calling Papoose her king. Publicly, repeatedly, in captions, in interviews, in posts, in lives. She has crowned him in front of the entire internet. And on the surface, Sugar, that word is beautiful. That word is romantic. That word is the kind of thing a woman says when she has found the man she wants to build a kingdom with. But love, notice what a king is. A king is somebody who inherits. A king is somebody who does not have to build. A king is somebody who is handed a throne that somebody else fought to construct. And that is exactly the dynamic she has installed. She is the one with the belts. She is the one with the $8 million fortune. She is the one with the platform. She is the one with the leverage. She built the kingdom. And she keeps handing the crown to a man who did not fight the fights that made the kingdom possible. Sugar, kings do not knock on the door of a castle they did not build. Kings inherit. And this champion is out here handing an inheritance to a man whose paperwork with somebody else is not yet closed. Now, of course, there is one accusation Shields is absolutely desperate to shut down. One clip, one line, one sentence she cannot afford to leave standing. And when that particular allegation came up, she came back swinging hard. She hit the internet with a line about how the radio host should have been asking her about weight cuts, about gym tips, about how she prepared for her fight, not about her relationship. And on the surface, Sugar, that line is cutting. It is savage. It is a champion telling a journalist to stay in her lane. Beautiful for the highlight reel. But notice something, because this is where the whole armor cracks. Claressa Shields will sit in front of a camera and describe her body in detail all day. She will describe her looks in detail all day. She will describe her private life in graphic detail on camera, on record. But the second somebody asks a factual question about the actual relationship, suddenly it is stay in your lane, suddenly it is ask about the gym. Sugar, that is not confidence. That is a nerve getting hit dead in the center. You do not dodge questions about the topic you are secure in. You dodge questions about the topic that keeps you up at night. And here is where the whole story turns into a nuclear event. Because the real source of Shields' rage was never MZ's Shinika. It was never the barber accusation. It was never the interview. The real source was Remy Ma. It was the wife. It was what the wife has been saying in her own quiet, deliberate way for months. Because on that same live stream, she tried to shut down one specific narrative that has been floating around every hip-hop timeline in America. The narrative that Papoose is not her partner, not her lover, not her equal, but her manager. The narrative that this man is using this champion to eat off the plate she built. And the champion swore, loud on camera, with her chest, that Papoose is not her manager, that he does not take a percentage, that he does not touch her money, that the whole story is a lie invented by his ex Sugar. Pay attention. Because that little sentence, that quick dismissal, that is where she buried herself. Because that entire he is managing your money, he is running your career, he is eating off your work narrative did not come from a hater. It did not come from a blog. It did not come from a random on Twitter. Came from the wife. The woman who was married to Papoose for over a decade. The woman who watched him operate up close. The woman who knows exactly how this man runs a household, runs a career, runs a marriage. When Remy Ma opens her mouth about Papoose, love, she is not gossiping. She is testifying. She is not speculating. She is remembering. And here is the irony that ties this entire circus into a bow so tight it could choke a horse. She swears Papoose is not managing her, is not using her, is not taking a dime of her fortune. But she is the one on live explaining his divorce timeline. She is the one on camera defending his intentions. She is the one on the internet fighting his ex-wife. She is the one exposing his enemies. She is the one doing the public relations tours he cannot afford to do himself. Sugar, if that man is not managing you, then somebody please explain why you are working his shift. A two-time Olympic gold medalist. A world champion. The self-crowned greatest woman boxer on planet Earth. Reduced to sitting on a live stream explaining her own bank account to strangers in a chat. You are the prize champion. You are the belt. You are the $8 million payday. So love, tell me, why are you fighting this hard to protect somebody else's receipt? And here is where the story sharpens into something dangerous. Because when you take one small step back and look at the entire chessboard, the picture that emerges is not a love story. It is not even a scandal. It is a business arrangement wearing a wedding cake wig. Shields is one of the highest-earning female athletes in combat sports history. Her name is a brand. Her fists are a brand. Her belts are a brand. And every single day she spends defending Papoose publicly, every hour she spends on live cleaning up allegations that used to belong to somebody else's marriage, is an hour her brand is not earning. Sponsors watch this. Networks watch this. Promoters watch this. Boxing does not forgive distraction. And the champion is currently the most distracted athlete in her own division. This is not just a personal disaster. This is a career-altering event happening in slow motion, one live stream at a time. Because sponsors do not read press releases, sugar. Sponsors read comment sections. Sponsors read reply tabs. Sponsors read the tone of a hashtag before they read the press release. And right now, every hashtag around this fighter is not about a knockout, is not about a title defense, is not about a legacy moment. Every hashtag is about a barber, a resume, a paperwork error, and a wife she cannot outrun. Sponsors see that. Sponsors log that. Sponsors move on. And when the phone stops ringing, sugar, it does not ring loud. It rings quiet. Silence is what happens when a brand becomes complicated. And she, in the span of one live stream, moved from bankable to complicated. That is not a small move. That is the move that ends careers, and nobody sees it happen because it happens over months, not days. And now let's pour a second cup because we have to talk about the paperwork mistake nobody is calling loud enough. When a public figure with a fortune this size dates a man who is still legally married, that fortune becomes exposed. It becomes a target. It becomes a bargaining chip in someone else's courtroom. Because in the state where Papoose's marriage is registered, marital assets during separation can, under certain circumstances, be argued to include gifts, income, and shared investments made during that separation window. Which means every belt the champion wins while she is publicly dating a man whose divorce is not yet finalized. Every purse she cashes, every endorsement she signs, every business she launches, every property she buys, every dollar she moves, becomes a document that a divorce attorney can theoretically point at and say, look right there, that happened while my client was still married. Sugar, this is not paranoia. This is the reason celebrity attorneys tell their clients not to publicly date married people. Not because it looks bad, because it can cost a lot. And Shields, a woman whose whole career is built on protecting herself, is walking into the ring without gloves. And this is where the difference between a fighter and a businesswoman becomes life-changing money. Sugar. Because a fighter thinks in rounds. A fighter thinks in punches. A fighter thinks in the next 12 minutes. But a businesswoman thinks in decades. A businesswoman thinks in generational wealth. A businesswoman thinks about what her name will be worth in 20 years, in 30 years, in 40 years, when the last bell rings and the belts are all in a case on a wall. This woman is a generational fighter. Nobody can take that from her. But right now, in this window, in this specific moment, she is not thinking like a businesswoman. She is thinking like a fighter defending her honor in a bar fight. And love, some fights you win by not showing up. Some fights you win by staying silent. Some fights you win by letting the paperwork speak for itself. She is fighting a fight she was never invited to. And every punch she throws in this fight is a punch that lands on her own bank account. But hold on, love, because there is another layer to this cake and I need to peel it slow. Remember, this whole storm started because MZ's Shinika asked one question. And the champion answered that question in a way that could have ended the news cycle in 12 hours. But instead, the champion chose to take a private frustration and turn it into a 9-day international scandal by attacking the journalist personally, by dragging a barber into it, by accusing another woman's husband of cheating, by reading a resume of her own body on camera, by defending paperwork she clearly has not read closely, and by publicly disrespecting the wife whose name is still on that paperwork. Every single one of those decisions was a choice. Every single one of those choices was self-inflicted. Nobody made her go on live. Nobody made her list her body parts on camera. Nobody made her turn a 5-minute interview into a 5-week news arc. That was all her. That was all champion energy pointed the wrong direction. That was all the training discipline of an Olympic athlete used to sabotage her own name. And you have to sit with the strategy of it, sugar. Because the champion did not clap back at Shinika in the studio. She did not challenge her on air. She did not call the radio station and request a follow-up. She waited days. She marinated in that question for days. She rehearsed her comeback in her head for days. And when she finally opened her mouth, she did it in the safest environment possible, in her own gym, on her own live, in front of her own fans, where nobody could interrupt, nobody could fact-check, nobody could ask her the follow-up question that would have exposed the whole story. That is not the behavior of a woman who has been unfairly attacked. That is the behavior of a woman who knows the accusation is landing and does not have a defense that survives scrutiny. And professional boxers understand this. In the ring, if you do not have a defense, you swing wild, hoping one punch lands hard enough to change the conversation. That is exactly what Shields did on that live. She could not defend the position, so she started swinging at everything in the room, hoping something would knock the story sideways. The barber accusation was a wild swing. The resume speech was a wild swing. The gym tips comeback was a wild swing. None of it defended the actual question. And now, days later, weeks later, the internet is still standing there, arms folded, waiting for the answer she never gave. Meanwhile, Remy Ma, the woman at the center of this hurricane, has said almost nothing directly. And that silence is the loudest sound in this entire scandal. Because Remy Ma understands something the champion is only about to learn. Silence is the most expensive weapon in a divorce. Every word Shields says on live is a word a lawyer can print out, put in a folder, and hand to a judge. Every accusation she makes about the wife is a word that can be used to establish emotional distress. Every claim she makes about the husband's paperwork is a word that can be used to establish knowledge of the marriage. Every dollar she spends publicly with Papoose during this window is a receipt that can be entered into evidence. And while the champion is out here running her mouth, Remy Ma is out here saying nothing. Sugar, one of these women is playing chess. The other one is playing checkers on the chessboard and does not even know the rules changed. And Remy Ma, love, is not just any wife. Remy Ma is a woman who has done federal time. Remy Ma is a woman who has survived a system that eats people alive. Remy Ma is a woman who came out of that experience with more restraint, more strategy, and more patience than most people gather in a lifetime. When a woman like that goes quiet, sugar, she is not defeated. She is loading. When a woman like that steps back from the microphone, she is not conceding. She is calculating. Silence from Remy Ma is not the sound of a woman losing. It is the sound of a woman letting somebody else lose loudly enough for both of them. Shields is providing the volume. Remy Ma is providing the receipts. That is the arrangement. That is the trap. And it is being sprung one live stream at a time while the champion in the middle of it thinks she is winning. And that is why the manager narrative matters. That is why the champion cannot let it go. That is why she jumped on live and burned 3 hours of her life trying to shut it down. Because the manager narrative is not just an insult. It is a legal characterization. If it can ever be argued in court that Papoose has been advising, guiding, or directing her career during this window, even informally, even without a written contract, that argument becomes a lever. That lever becomes leverage. That leverage becomes money. And that money becomes exactly the kind of settlement Papoose would love to see finalized in a divorce court where he currently owns nothing but the version of himself he sold to the public. That is why this word matters. That is why she cannot let it stand. That is why her rage was disproportionate. That is why she came out swinging. And there is something else nobody is talking about, sugar. Something that connects every loose thread in this entire story. Papoose is the only person in this circus who has nothing to lose. Think about it. Remy Ma has her legacy, her music, her family, her career. Shields has her belts, her fortune, her endorsements, her name. MZ's Shinika has her platform, her show, her audience, her reputation. Everybody in this story has skin in the game except one man. Papoose is the one person whose paperwork protects him no matter which way the wind blows. If the divorce finalizes, he walks with a portion of a champion's fortune. If it does not finalize, he keeps his access to his family, his reputation as a devoted father, and his public loyalty to Remy Ma. Every scenario in this story ends with Papoose winning. Every scenario. And meanwhile, the two women fighting each other in public are the two women who have the most to lose. Sugar, that is not an accident. That is the architecture. That is a man who has structured his life so that no matter which way the story ends, he does not lose. And this champion, the greatest woman boxer alive, has walked willingly into a corner she cannot punch her way out of. Because you cannot punch paperwork. You cannot knock out a filing date. You cannot uppercut a signature. And now let me pull back the camera one more time. Because this whole story, when you view it from 30,000 feet, is not really about a barber. It is not really about a resume. It is not really about gym tips. It is about a champion who forgot the first rule of every fight she has ever won, which is that you do not throw punches you cannot land. You do not swing at ghosts. You do not fight opponents you have not scouted. You do not open your guard in the middle of the ring. Shields opened her guard on that live stream. She opened it wide. She opened it in front of the whole world. And now the world is looking at her chin. And the wife whose name is still on that marriage license is standing across the ring, silent, patient, unmoving. She has not thrown a single punch yet. She does not need to. The champion has been throwing punches at her own reflection for weeks. And there is a Shields moment that keeps replaying in my head, sugar, and I want to name it out loud because it is the single frame that summarizes the whole scandal. It is the moment the champion, mid-live, mid-rant, mid-defense, catches herself smiling. Right in the middle of listing her body, right in the middle of accusing a wife, right in the middle of dismissing a journalist, she breaks into a grin. Because in her head, she is winning. In her head, she is the smartest person in the room. In her head, she has just checkmated the entire internet. And love, that grin is the tell. That grin is the exact moment when a person who is about to lose everything believes they have already won. Every boxing coach in America knows that grin. It is the grin a fighter wears in the second round before they get knocked out in the third. It is the grin of somebody who has confused adrenaline for strategy. Claressa Shields grinned on that live. And months from now, when the paperwork closes, that grin is going to become the most clipped frame of her entire career. Not because she was smiling, because she was smiling at the wrong opponent. Sugar, let me tell you something about mirrors. Mirrors do not lie. Mirrors do not exaggerate. Mirrors do not spin. When you throw a punch at a mirror, the mirror throws the same punch back with the same speed, the same power, and the same anger. Shields, on that live, was throwing every accusation at a mirror. Every word she said about Shinika was really a word about herself. Every claim she made about Remy Ma was really a claim she needed to hear about her own situation. Every jab she threw at somebody else's marriage landed on the frame she has been trying to build around her own. And now the whole internet has watched it happen. The whole internet has watched a champion box her own reflection and pretend she was winning. And I promise you, love, the audience knows the difference between a fighter and a mirror match. The audience always knows. There is also something that needs to be said about the age gap, sugar. Papoose is significantly older than the champion. And I do not say that to be mean. I say that to establish the imbalance. Because when a man in his 40s with a decade of marriage behind him, with children behind him, with a whole public life behind him, ends up in a relationship with a woman in her prime championship years, there is a dynamic there that needs to be looked at with clear eyes. He has more experience navigating relationships, navigating breakups, navigating divorce, navigating money conversations, navigating public perception, navigating everything. She is fighting a war he has already lived through. And every word she says on live is a word that reveals how outmatched she is in a game she did not know she was playing. Boxing prepared her for the ring. Nothing prepared her for a man who has already survived a divorce court once and knows exactly how to survive it a second time. And this is where you have to feel a certain kind of sympathy for the champion, Sugar. Because none of this makes her a bad person. It makes her a young champion in love with a man who is playing a game she does not know exists. She thinks this is about romance. He knows this is about paperwork. She thinks this is about their future together. He knows this is about his current legal position. She is fighting for a relationship. He is fighting for a settlement. And those are not the same fight. Those are not even the same sport. Claressa Shields is showing up to a boxing match. Papoose is playing a completely different game on a completely different board. And when you are the only person in a room who does not know what game is being played, love, you are the game. And there is a version of this story, love, where none of this had to happen. There is a version where she answered the one question in the studio, closed the topic, went home, kept training, kept winning, kept building. There is a version where the champion never opened a live stream. There is a version where the barber accusation never left her lips. There is a version where the résumé speech never happened. There is a version where the word filed never became a weapon somebody could use against her. That version is the one her financial advisor is dreaming about right now. That version is the one her lawyer is grieving over on a Tuesday night. That version is the one that would have kept her fortune intact and her legacy clean. But that version does not exist. Because the champion chose the live stream. She chose the mic. She chose the microphone over the mouthguard. And every choice compounds, sugar. Every choice compounds. And listen, I know some of you in the comments are about to tell me I am being too hard on the champion. I hear you. I love her too. I have been in her corner since Flint. I have watched her take on opponents nobody else would fight. I have watched her demand equal pay in a sport that hates women. I have watched her build something out of absolutely nothing. Claressa Shields is a phenomenon. She is a legend. She deserves the best of the best. But love, deserving the best does not mean you are receiving the best. And a woman who has spent her entire life fighting for what she deserves owes it to herself to look at what she is currently accepting and ask if it matches. That is not hate. That is love with its shoes on. So love, here is where we land. The barber accusation was not a defense. It was a distress signal. The résumé speech was not a flex. It was an audition tape for a role she has already been cast in. The gym tips comeback was not a shutdown. It was a confession that the real question hurt. The word filed was not a shield. It was a countdown timer. The word manager was not a lie invented by an ex-wife. It was a term of art coming from the only witness who actually watched this man work. And underneath all of it, Sugar is a two-time Olympic gold medalist, the greatest woman boxer alive, spending her prime years, her platform, and her fortune defending a paperwork situation she does not understand, in front of an audience that is starting to notice. And here is the last thing I need you to hold on to, Sugar. Because this is the thing that separates the poor from the gossip. Every story like this ends the same way. Every single one. The champion always finds out. The paperwork always speaks. The wife always keeps the receipts. And the man always walks away with a settlement that was funded by the woman who thought she was in love. It has happened 100 times. It will happen 100 more. And the only reason we are still telling this story is because somebody in the future will search this exact scenario and need to find this exact warning. So bookmark this timestamp. Screenshot this thumbnail. Remember where you were when you heard the prediction. Because when the divorce finalizes, when the settlement lands, when the numbers come out, When the receipts drop, this video will be sitting right here, timestamped, dated, waiting. But hey, sugar, that is just my read. Now I need yours. So that is the pour. The barber bomb she threw to save herself. The resume she read like a job application. The word filed that could quietly cost her half her fortune. And the manager narrative that came straight out of the wife's mouth. Messy? Deeply. Iconic? Also deeply. Career-defining? Almost certainly. Now choose your corner. Are you Team Claressa, she checked her? Or Team Claressa, she exposed her own self? Park your verdict in the comments and let the timeline eat. Drop me a like if you learned something. Hit subscribe if you want the next pour. Share this with a friend in the group chat who has been screenshotting every clip since day one. I'm Simone. The kettle stays screaming here. And the cup, sugar, is always full strength.